Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Fitness Education Online podcast. I'm super excited because we have an absolute rock star in the fitness industry on the line this week. Now, if you listen to this podcast, I actually give that intro to everyone. I call him a rock star, but this guy is an actual rock star. His name's Travis Mattern. Travis, how are you?
Very good, Jono. Thank you very much.
No. So that makes it even more special. So I only bring Travis on if it is like a really, really, really important guest. And a little bit about this person. If you're listening to this and you're from Australia, New Zealand, anywhere in the Southern Hemisphere, actually, you've probably heard of the Fitness Expo or Filex or the Fitness Show. And there's actually a little bit of difference between all of those, which is what we're going to get into here. But this man is responsible for most of the growth of that. And it's a really cool story about how it came about that we're going to talk about. And then also he's actually got something really cool that's coming up later in this year that I'm excited to chat to him about as well. We'll get to the story in a sec, but let me introduce him. It's Mr. Shaun Krenz. Shaun, how are you?
Really good, Jono. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
No, I'm excited myself. Let me think what the best way to do it. You know what? Let's just start with a bit of a story. I'll go and I've got some notes here about how the Fitness Expo started in the first place, and then when you came into it. Maybe I'll just start with that, and then I'll hand it over to you, and you can continue the story, or you can correct me if there's any hiccups in there. Does that work with you?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So here's the notes I've got from the history of the Australian Fitness Expo. It started with Filex in 1995 by the Australian Fitness Network. They were running some conferences in Melbourne in the Gold Coast earlier than that, but the first Filex one was actually in Sydney in 1995. Now, I've got an interesting question. Do either of you two know what Filex stands for?
I, of course, do.
You're okay.
Fitness, international, leisure, exercise, Expo.
Yeah. Shaun, what's the answer?
Pretty close, mate. It's actually fitness, industry, leisure, exhibition.
Correct. Now, that started 95, mainly by Australian Fitness Network. And to my understanding, it was mainly just for the fitness industry. It was just fitness professionals, suppliers. It was obviously earlier stages in the industry, but not so much the general public. In about 1998, Gatorade took sponsorship and it became known as the Gatorade Fitness Expo. That then changed around because the name Gatorade gave it a certain impression. Who's it for? Is it just for Gatorade? So in 2001, it changed to the Australian Fitness Expo. And then the biggest change, or the most important thing, happened in 2009 when the Australian Fitness Expo that was run by Diversified Communications actually hired a qualified personal trainer, Mr. Shaun Krenz, to have a bit of a role there. And that's where this man comes in. So let's start there, Shaun. What was your first role in the Expo? And was it the Expo?
Good segue. So the guys that started Filex, they really are fitness industry legends and icons, and they moved on now, I think, and just living the good life these days, and so they should. But Nigel Champion and Greg Hurst, both also had a role with Australian Institute of Fitness here in Australia, and in many aspects potentially created the fitness industry as we know it, because up until 1995, personal trainers didn't really exist. There was aerobics instructions, but the landscape of the actual fitness industry was really different. And, funny enough, I actually grew up in the fitness industry. My father was the CEO of the YMCA. So my upbringing was, in YMCAs, which is really where gyms were. If you're born in the 80s like I am, that's
police boys clubs and...
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the YMCA or the PCYC. So centres where you'd see basketball courts and squash courts and indoor pools, and there was a gym as well. So my first job was at the YMCA. I'd get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and go and vacuum the aisleways and take the covers off the pool and try and be a little gym rat and do whatever I could. But I think the rule was you couldn't actually join the gym until you turned 15. And as soon as that occurred, I was in there, and that kind of really ignited a fire for me and kind of molded the passion that I had. There was a powerlifting club there, I remember, and I used to look on at the big boys there with a bit of envy and wanted to get some of mine, and really sort of set me off on the path where I've ended up, I suppose. But as I said earlier, there wasn't a fitness industry, so it wasn't a really lucrative pathway back then. I became a qualified personal trainer in the early 2000s. And back then that was administered by the TAFE, I think it was called Diploma of Athletic Training or something like that. But the role at the YMCA was more just managing the gyms and doing some pool stuff. And I had pretty much every job you could have with the YMCA at that point in time. But ended off kind of branching out, and I always had the gift of the gab somewhat. So worked in the corporate world in sales-based roles, kind of more so in the leisure industry with hotels and whatnot, and did really well at that. Studied events at university, so had that as a background. And the period leading up to 2009, just to get to that and answer your question, I think the first part is Nigel and Greg sold their Expo components, Australian Fitness Network. They sold the Expo component to what was called Australian Exhibition Services in 2005. That, of course, become Diversified Communications, who still exist today. So,
is that when it became a bit more Gen Pop fitness interested, or
I'm responsible for that, so I have to get all the accolades, all the flack, if you like.
Well, look, maybe from the fitness industry, but not from the general population. The general population loves it. It's a busy event, so
yeah.
Maybe for the fitness industry people, like for me personally, I never loved it for the it was just protein supplements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who's just a fitness fanatic, it's a great place to go.
That's when I was a young kid. That's where I went just to get the free supplements. I was like, oh yeah, Fitness Expo.
And the old yogurt, the Chobani yogurts.
Well, that actually segues really well into what I'm doing now and the kind of backstory to it, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But so yeah, my story was as I've told, and I was actually found my way back working in events, but on a career expo and trade shows. That was my introduction in around 2007, 2008, and loved it. Just loved the trade show concept, and having that passion for the fitness industry was like, wow, I wonder if there's something out there, for the fitness industry. And, looked at what was going on in the US with Mr. Olympia and the Arnolds and of course Ursa. And I didn't, Filex kind of didn't have brand recognition or the Fitness Expo back then in the Australian market. But sure enough, I learned that there was, and Diversified Communications were the organizer. So I cold called them. I said, basically, I want to come and work for you, and this is my vision. You've got a trade show at the moment, because back then it was pure B2B, right? It was really just equipment suppliers looking to sell equipment into fitness facilities. And my vision was that this could become like a mass, consumer-driven festival, which is obviously what it did turn out to be, rightly or wrongly. And so I sold them that, and I joined in 2009, and we really.
How hard was that, Shaun? That cold call to get that role? Was it straight in? Was it hard?
Mate, I was young and full of confidence. I'm getting old now, and sometimes I wish I had the confidence I had back then. But I was just, this is what I'm going to do, and I did it. My pitch was, I don't want to get paid a lot of money. I want a bit of skin in the game type thing. But, if you give me a chance, this is what we can do, because it was quite small from an expo standpoint back then. So they gave me the gig, and then it's kind of really interesting what happened from particularly 2009 to 2013, which were our glory years. We can get into all that, but
let me just summarize there for everyone else. So we'll go from there. So it was originally the one thing. It was the Filex and the lecture things and the Expo were owned by the same thing. Then there was a split, and it was like, right, Australian Fitness Network, you've got Filex, you've got the education side of things. Okay, Expo, diversified, you're over here. It's still mainly just for people in the fitness industry. And then Shaun comes in 2009. What do we do from there, Shaun? What do you change? Does it stay just the fitness industry? Do you expand? Do you stay in Sydney? What sort of happens from there?
Yeah, so that's a really good point of clarification, because I was, of course, running the trade show. Filex still existed, but as the conference, everyone in the industry just called the whole thing Filex, right? And that was that
Tell
was
the story. Tell the story, Shaun. The Ursa story.
yeah. I mean, that was never addressed to a point that I'd be at Ursa in the US most years, being introduced as the head of Filex and whatnot. And I could, there was honestly times where it was like too hard to even correct, you know. So we tried, hence all the different brand names over the journey. You know, it was Australian Fitness and Health Expo, then it was Fitness Show, and back and forward type thing. And you know, we worked really closely with Filex. That was a great partnership at that point in time, right up until 2017. Nigel and Australian Fitness Network still owned and ran that event. And Brian Hogan was the CEO, who's now the CEO of Les Mills. And it was a really great working partnership that just worked, you know. So 2009 was the time when we opened up to consumers. That was year one of consumer traffic.
Your decision, Shaun?
Oh, look, yeah, I guess I have to take responsibility for that. And, you know, we went from an event that was attended by 5,000 people in 2009, a one-off event that ran in Darling Harbour, to an event that in 2013 was attended by 38,000 people. And instead of it being 5,000 square meters, it was 25,000 square meters. So seeing extraordinary growth. And as I'm sure you can imagine, from an ownership standpoint, everyone was pretty happy. At that point, I had hair and I was the golden hair boy.
Awesome. All right, cool. So let's spend a minute there. We might get into this later. What were your thoughts originally, Shaun? So 5,000 to 38,000, awesome growth there. Yeah. Probably a different demographic now, right? Where it was just the industry people there, now general public. Not sure if we'll get to this later, or you want to spend a few minutes now. What was that like? What were the changes? What did you need to change? What were the good things? What were the bad things? What was different?
Yeah, I mean, everything's timing, right? It was like that perfect moment in time where social media was also a thing.
Yeah. Probably biggest loser around then, or it was probably a bit before,
that's right.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, really Facebook.
When did all the 24-hour gyms and everything start? Like, when was gym culture? When do you think that kicked off in Australia? Like, everyone was a member of a gym.
I'd say 2014, where the 24 and the chains really started to kick off.
It wasn't that long ago, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, back in 2009 to 2013, it was it was still mostly independently owned gyms, and there was about 3,500 of them, and they'd all come to Filex, and it was great. So what happened was we had this really good trade show because we maintained that. Yeah, that was in its own section. The future in 2009 becomes zone specific. So what happened was we had a commercial equipment and business services zone. We had a wellness and vitality zone, an education zone, and then a strength and conditioning zone, which is where all the supplement companies were. And that, of course, just become massive and, really started to have an impact, towards the perception, I guess, because that wasn't everyone's cup of tea. But from an ownership standpoint, again, we were driving really good revenue from that category. So it was a difficult position to be in. And, thousands of people would come and snatch and grab freebies or those supplements, So, so that was the future, and because the gym landscape was all independently owned, they'd all come to this event and they'd make their purchasing, and the trade component was performing whilst consumer was getting massive growth, right? And just really coupled with the rise, I think, in consumer interest in fitness and social media kind of driving a lot of that, and we were benefiting from marketing on social media, and it was a really fun time.
Awesome. Okay. And then you expanded, I believe. It went from just Sydney to sort of a few different locations. I think Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth. That was all still part of the Fitness Expo, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, I mean, in that period, again, which I keep referring back to, we couldn't do anything wrong. Every year, the visitor numbers went from 5,000 to 15,000 to 25,000, all the way up to 37,000. The show just kept getting bigger and bigger. So we kept exceeding expectations, which was a great place to be. So, in 2012, a lot of our exhibitors were saying, you need to take this interstate. Let's do it everywhere type thing, where, people were selling clothing on their stand, making like 200 grand in sales.
Wow.
And so we went to Perth. We launched Perth in 2013. I guess a big moment in time also was in 2013, the actual venue in Darling Harbour was demolished.
That's right.
And there was no longer a venue that was big enough to host the event. And so we had to relocate the national version that co-located with Filex to Melbourne. Okay. And the 2014 event in Melbourne absolutely flopped. The visitor numbers.
Really?
Yeah, the visitor numbers went from 37,000 to 19,000, so almost halved.
Wow.
And everyone went to Melbourne expecting what they got in 2013, right? And we were there. We were there in Melbourne for 3 years. We had a serious competitor with the Arnold running there also, who were hurting us in the supplement space, but not so much other categories. But supplement was a big part of our revenue, and same with the visitor numbers it attracted. So that was, from there onwards, we were always kind of trying to get back to our 2013 glory, right? We launched Perth. The national event went to Melbourne. For 2 years, we ran an event at Olympic Park, which was consumer only, which also wasn't very good. 15,000 people come along, but
it's just, that's location, right? It shows how important location is, doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah, people went the eastern suburbs types.
I wouldn't travel to Homebush for it.
Well, I remember that one clearly, right? Because I went to that one, and I remember the mood. Even it was like, so that would have been So 2013, I went. 20. Yeah, well, the ones before, so say like 2012, 2013, I was all over the expo. There were NRL stars. They would buy shoes. I'd buy clothing. It was really fun. And then we heard it was going to Melbourne, this and that. We're like, oh, here's this one in Homebush. Let's see what it's like. And I went with a few friends. It wasn't bad, but it was like, it's just not quite, it's not quite last year's. That was sort of the mood.
That was the thing, right? So everyone's expectation of the Homebush event, even though it was at Homebush, when I say everyone's, I'm meaning the exhibitors. The expectation was Darling Harbour 2013.
Yeah.
It was nowhere near that, as you experienced, right? So, but our strategy was kind of to protect the Sydney market, because there's other organisers, the people that owned the FIBO event in Germany, we actually ended up selling the fitness show too. I'll get to that next, but that we knew they wanted to get in. And so the purpose of Homebush was ultimately to protect that market, and it worked. Okay. Yeah. Then in 2015, we acquired, there was a local guy that started running an event in Brisbane called the Brisbane Fitness and Health Expo. And we just took that out of the market and acquired it as well, put it under our portfolio. So for that period, 2016, 2017, 2018, we were doing it 4 times a year. But really, the only event that was making good money was the one that ran, the national one. Okay.
Question here, Shaun. I've got in my notes that in 2016, the expo was actually sold to Talk to Media.
Yeah, so I was part of that ownership group. And so that's a great segue. I think we've covered what happened up to 2016 really well. And as we've stated, it was owned by Diversified Communications, who made it, and they're a global player in the trade show and conference space. They do $500 million turnover a year.
Would you say did you say $500,000, Shaun, or
$500 million?
$500 million, okay.
Yeah, so they're a big company based in the US, right? And we were just the Australian division. But they made a decision globally to sell consumer shows. So they just wanted to play in trade, so that core B2B space. So if you think of other industries like oil and gas or mining, you imagine it's just purely about connecting buyers and sellers, right? That's where they wanted to play, because it's safer. You don't get the fluctuations in revenues that you get with a consumer show. So fitness, even though it had a trade component, fell into that consumer bracket, which was good, because we thought, okay, there's an opportunity to snap it up and run it as ourselves, which we did. Took it on in 2016, and that coupled with the return to Darling Harbour in 2017, which was the second best event we ever ran. 2013 will always be the best, but there was tremendous hype about the return to Darling Harbour.
That's the first one you went to, Trav. That one was sick. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
John Jones is our special guest, and heaps of other special guests. And the trade component was still pumping. Consumer was good. But really, we really sold on the hype of returning to Darling Harbour.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of exhibitors spending big money to kind of stand out from the crowd, so to speak.
Numbers on that one, Shaun? How many? Do you remember the numbers on that?
32,000 for that one. Yeah.
Okay. And
Uh,
quick.
You
Yeah,
go.
you go. Sorry. No, you go.
I was going to say it probably didn't meet the expectations of 2013 still though. So, you know, 2018, a year after that, wasn't as good. And at this point in time, we're competing with whole heaps of other, you know, a lot of other things from a marketing spend.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're dealing with consumers, you're now basically dealing with just online buying. Like it's so much easier. Like that, the ease to buy protein and the ease to buy so much of this stuff online is just, yeah.
That's true. Yeah, we butter our bread via revenue derived from exhibitor sales, right? The door, people coming through the door, it's kind of irrelevant. It pays for our fees, but yeah, it's not how we put butter on the bread, as I said. So exhibitors were saying exactly that, Travis. You know, they go, why am I going to drop 50 grand on a stand build? Because that's how much it costs minimum. You know, if you want a decent activation, when I can just go and spend this on social media, and it's going to drive this for me. You know,
Yeah.
so it was getting bloody hard. Consumer was getting hard. It was still really fun for most people, but it was hard work, right? So anyhow, we delivered that event. You go though. You go first.
Yeah, I was going to say. So just with that turnover with like Diversified and Talk to Media, did you now work for Talk to Media? Is that how that worked, or did
so I was part of that ownership group, and so we took the team from Diversified with us and just continued on.
Gotcha. Yeah? So your whole team that was doing the Fitness Expo stuff there came across to Talk to Media.
Yep, and Talk to Media still exists today. I'm no longer a part of it because what happened is in 2017, after we delivered that event in Darling Harbour, Reed Exhibitions come knocking, who own FIBO, which is the largest fitness expo in the world, runs in Cologne in Germany, is attended by 180,000 Europeans and over 1,000 exhibitors. Literally takes you 4 days to get through the whole thing. It's unbelievable, right?
That's crazy.
So they come knocking. We had no intent to sell, mind you, but they just kept coming and coming, and eventually it just got too good to refuse, and bang, that was it. We sold. I signed a continuation of service agreement to stay on and run the business, which I was fulfilling right up until last year when COVID hit. Reed Exhibitions are a massive business. I talked about Diversified before. Reed were doing 1.5 billion in annual turnover per year. That was, of course, decimated with COVID.
To zero, right? Because you can't.
Effectively. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's digital revenues and whatnot, but almost. And so an outcome of that was that, I don't know the exact figure, I'm going to say hundreds, maybe even thousands of employees globally were made redundant, including myself and all of my non-compete clauses, right? And so that's kind of brings you up to where we are today almost. You know, I was again at a fork in the road type moment. It's like, okay, do we pick up the fitness show again and just continue on? Or do we do something completely different that's a reflection of what we think the market needs? And obviously,
I mean, it's so funny because just bouncing off the COVID thing, like I know gyms, especially Melbourne, obviously Melbourne's obviously been hit real hard over and over and over again. But for those of us who've been in Sydney, obviously we had it was about a 12-week, maybe a 12-week shutdown, maybe, which we were all funded by, like everyone got their, if you were shut down, you got your, job keepers and all that sort of stuff, right? But just shows you the impact globally that COVID had, like how well Australia escaped out of it, I think, because, like you're talking about a $1.5 billion company, and they're not the only company, and it just must have wiped out so much of the global economy.
Yep, 100%, mate. Major events was one of the industries probably decimated the most, right? And Australia's a small market, 1.5 billion in turnover. A smidgen of that was coming from Australia. So, that decision was made, and for me, it was a stressful time. I'm going to be honest. I was living in Melbourne at the time in lockdown, and wife, 4 kids, and shit, what are we going to do now? And initially, I just wanted to pick up the fitness show and continue with it because that's what I know, right? But as we've spoken about, it had become like my vision with the fitness show was always to maintain trade, just add consumer, right? Consumer took over, and it become this fun day out festival that's seen attendance from 30,000 18 to 30-year-olds for the most part, wanting to snatch and grab freebies, take their photos with influencers, do workouts. It was great at that, don't get me wrong, but in terms of adding value to the actual fitness industry at the commercial end of the market, it was really starting to decline.
Well, last year, were you involved? Not last year, it would be the year before, right? Last year, they sort of had two separate things, right? They sort of had a trade, it was like a trade area.
Yeah.
And then that which was separate to the expo, and that was where they had all the, the gym equipment and, like the treadmills and the commercial equipment.
Yeah. So that was my decision as well, because having all the commercial stuff alongside the consumer activity, of course, didn't create an environment that was conducive to business. And so the plan was to fix that with the separation on different levels. Your CEOs of gym chains, as you could imagine, they don't want to be rubbing shoulders with all that sort of consumer activity. But I think even with that, knowing what I know now, it was too far gone. It was really going to be hard work to fix it. And so, what happened was, back in June last year, we decided to launch or announce, and when I say we, I joined forces with another organizer called National Media, who are, they play in just trade and commercial, trade and conference, and they're very good at what they do. They've been around since 1993. And so we got together and come up with Fitness Wellness Australia, which is an event that will see attendance from industry professionals only. So kind of going back to the beginning, but we don't just want it to be about fitness. It's kind of more a fitness facility event that will see attendance from, of course, gyms, that's the easy part, but also councils, rec centres, private schools, because they have fitness facilities, universities, same again, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll have a conference alongside it, and we're really excited about it. It's scheduled for November this year, and we think it's going to be a real line in the sand moment for the fitness industry.
Yeah. Well,
can I ask a quick question, Jono, before you go ahead?
Yeah.
Just circling back to those days when you took it to the other states, you went to Perth, you went to Brisbane. Was that purely consumer, or was that also tied into professional development for trainers as well with that? Or was that just a pure fitness show?
So Perth initially had a commercial component as well, because it's like its own country over there anyway, right? Didn't perform though. And we tried to run conferences as well, which were by Australian Fitness Network, but not called WAFIC in Perth or Immersive, or sorts of different names, and never really worked either.
Yeah, okay.
Ultimately, what I learned through all of that is that the industry needs one big, huge event per year. And that's what our market's big enough for. So it was a mistake to go into all those different cities. Upon reflection, you live and learn, right? We wanted growth. We got growth in revenue, perhaps not growth in profit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear all about Fitness and Wellness Australia, Shaun. The way I sort of discovered it, I was like, what's going on with the fitness industry? I'm like, okay, COVID's gone. Is there still an expo? I'm Googling Fitness Expo. It's not even called Fitness Expo anymore, but I'm like, Fitness Expo, is it on? I'm like, okay, same time as Filex. Let me Google Filex. Okay, Filex has got two smaller ones. Is there a trade show there? Is there not? I was super confused. And then I stumbled across Fitness and Wellness Australia, and I'm like, okay, it looks like this is something similar, but not quite. So yeah, let us know what exactly is Fitness Australia. Give us all the details. What's in, as what you know at this stage anyway. What's included, who's it for, what's the goal. Tell us as much info as you can there.
Yeah. So as I said, we announced Fitness Wellness Australia way back in July last year, way before we were ready. But it was strategic because other people were looking at the fitness show, we felt, and what was Reed going to do with that. So we wanted to put our flag in the ground, so to speak, and let the industry know this is what we're doing. And that worked, because 4 weeks after we made that announcement, Reed Exhibitions simply advised that the fitness show portfolio would be discontinued.
There we go. So wait, let me get my head around this. So Reed let some staff go. You were part of that staff
Yeah,
there.
that's right. Yeah,
At that stage, the fitness show hadn't been cancelled,
yeah,
but then you got together with your team. You were like, right, let's do Fitness and Wellness Australia.
yeah.
And then Reed obviously saw that, was like, oh, no, we're going from
Yeah, I mean, whether that was the actual reason, I'd say it was more just about them having
COVID.
to do what they did, right? They
Yeah.
closed 400 shows. Again, I'm not sure the exact number, but
Yeah.
they closed a lot of shows worldwide, and probably more so for bottom line purposes. But we didn't know, right? Someone else could just come in with something new,
Yeah.
or it could have ended up somewhere. So we had to make that statement, and I guess it was effective because Reed makes that announcement. It was discontinued, and we did a really good job capturing the opportunity from an exhibitor standpoint on the back of my relationships somewhat and national media's expertise. And so as it stands, Fitness Wellness Australia really is, where it is, the only event of its kind in this region. Certainly at this scale, when you think that we've got 10,000 square metres of exhibition space at the ICC in Darling Harbour, the 1,000-seat keynote theatres, and all the conference rooms as well. So, it's a massive event. And I can't talk to what Filex are doing, but I do know they're running the workshops and whatnot at other venues now. But yeah, ultimately we are the new trade show and conference for everyone in the fitness, active health, and leisure industry.
So I just want to clarify under that, just so people who are listening who may have missed it, may not have missed it. You're going to be running the not consumer, but trade show. So equipment, anything relevant to business industry there, as well as a professional development side of things.
Yep, correct. So it's a trade show, it's a conference, it's a matchmaking program, and there's also a hosted buyers program in place. So the model
matchmaking program, you've got Jono in. That's like Tinder. Jono's like
a dating thing. I'll get the VIP for that, actually, Shaun.
So how that works is, as our attendees register, they'll indicate products or services that they're interested in. Once they do that, a match gets made with suppliers of those products or services. So it just helps support what should be a proper trade show, right? That type of thing wasn't in play prior with the fitness show. But look, our model's 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, from the 11th to the 13th of November. And again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, to reflect that it's a business event, not a consumer event. 120 plus exhibitors, 100 plus speakers in the conference program. We think 5,000 plus attendees, but we want to fill the room with quality, right? We're not flooding it with irrelevant consumers for this purpose like we used to. And so how it will work is we'll run a keynote each day from sort of 8 to 10 a.m. if you like, in the keynote theatre, and that'll be led by an icon, but from outside of the industry perhaps, but with transferable skill sets. So someone who could speak on leadership, for example, and we all just run out sort of pumped up and off we go. So the trade show will then start open at 10 o'clock and coincide with many business theatres covering tracks of content that detail the full realm of relevant content for an owner operator or a fitness professional in this region. Okay.
Love it.
Awesome. Cool. So 2 follow-up questions from that. Number 1, can we get tickets now? Is it open to register, or what can we do now?
We're about to turn on registration. And so the marketing machine will also be turned on, because to this point, it's just mostly been through my networks from a marketing standpoint. But the website, you can pre-register now to keep up to date with everything as it happens. So if you go to www.fwa.show, you can pre-register there via the links. And then we're just finalizing some pieces from a creative standpoint with marketing. But as I say, the actual ticketing process will be turned on within the next, sort of 6 weeks as well.
Gotcha. And in terms of pricing, just so some of the listeners can get their head around it, the Fitness Expo, I think, was $10-20. You could probably get in for free if you had got in early or whatever. And then Filex was usually around the $1,000 mark. What are you sort of price? Can you just do the education? Can you just do the trade show? Can you do one day both? What can you tell us there?
Yep. So the ticketing model will be, just trade show, if that's all you want to do, or trade show plus keynote, or trade show plus opening party, because we plan to run a party, like a giant industry party, on either night 1 or night 2. And I want you to picture 1,500 industry professionals, open bar, live entertainment, everyone doing what we've missed so much through this COVID period, right? That's what happens at a great trade show, because it's more about the networking. That's as important as everything else. Or then the full pass, so full 3-day access, which will get you into everything, or just a 1-day access, right? So from a conference standpoint, the pricing will be somewhere between 25 to 50% of the price of what was in play prior. And yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right. I think I've got one final question. So the biggest change is obviously going to be it's more industry focused than consumer focused. Apart from that, Shaun, what would you say is like the biggest difference that Fitness and Wellness Australia is going to be compared to what the Fitness Show or the Fitness Expo used to be?
I think who's in the room. The people in the room will be senior executives, management teams, investors, owners, fitness professionals who are business driven, right? Wanting to have a future within the fitness industry. And then, also across the different vertical markets also. So not just gyms, but also public sector, hotels, universities, even military personnel, right? Because they all run big fitness organizations within their business. But then also the exhibitor profile. Sports nutrition is a good example. That will still be there, but not in the form that we've seen prior. They'll be there for business purposes, looking to secure wholesale arrangements direct into fitness facilities. Okay, so you won't hear the blaring music or the festival type vibes, because again, we're creating a business environment.
It'll be sell my products in your gym sort of thing.
Correct, yeah. The equipment stands will be our biggest. So, your Life Fitnesses and Matrix and those types, showcasing their full range for supply into a fitness facility, and they'll launch new products. So anything new from a fitness equipment standpoint will be on the floor. There's a lot of tech. There'll be payment solution companies, entry control companies, lighting, fit out, essentially anything that you could possibly think of for supply into a fitness facility. That's where we're playing.
Awesome. Love it. Well, I'm excited. I'm going to be there for sure. Travis is going to be there for sure. That's pretty much all I wanted to get through today, Shaun. Trav, did you have anything you wanted to ask Shaun?
No, I mean, it sounds awesome. I was just going to say, obviously, this has been, months and months in the making. I think you mentioned you had 100 exhibitors, and you've got all your speakers and all that sort of stuff lined up already. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the list and seeing how it looks.
Yeah. Look, it's been a real hustle. I must admit, you see the good things on social media, but behind the scenes has been a lot of hard work. And we actually don't have all the speakers confirmed yet. We've kind of got the subjects that we want to cover within the conference confirmed, and now we've got to go.
Yeah, you got two spares, Shaun, around the sales and marketing space.
I think we can find something for sure. And so, yeah, we'll turn that on, and that's where a lot of the excitement will come, because we've been announcing all our exhibitors as we go. But I think once we see the speakers and the subjects we're going to cover, it'll really start to conceptualize.
Awesome. And I'll just give it a plug from my end. Like, I think if there's a trade show or there's a conference or a convention or an expo in the fitness space, like this guy's the guy that knows how to do it. So if you listen to this and you're tossing up, like, listen to Shaun. At least come to this one, see how you go, and go from there. Shaun, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Is there anything you wanted to finish off with? Is there anything me and Travis should have asked you that forgot to ask, or how do you want to leave us off?
No, you know what? I think we went through 25 years of history pretty efficiently there.
Awesome. Perfect. Do you want to give the website a quick plug again?
Yes, it's www.fwa.show. Go and check it out. It's got some good detail actually on who's in the room and what you can expect.
Absolutely love it.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Awesome. All right. Thank you for your time, Shaun.
Thanks, gents. Great.